This is Mike W. with World War II with Mike W., the history of the 95 Years' War. Just a quick reminder, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and also click on the notification bell. And please leave your comments below. This all helps me and the channel. In this episode, I will be discussing the Spanish Civil War that starts here in 1936 and lasts for 3 years. I feel that telling the whole story of the Civil War is too important, and not to tell the whole thing would be a disservice. So I will not just stick with 1936 in this video. It is easy to say that it begins with one moment or another, but this Civil War has been brewing in Spain for several years. I have discussed this descent into darkness of civil war at different stages throughout the 1930s. This is the final struggle, with one side being victorious. Remember, Spain was a monarchy only 5 years ago. They had voted their king out, and this was the first attempt at democracy in Spain. On February 16th of 1936, an election was held in Spain. The election was won by the Popular Front here in Spain. In my last video, I talked about who the Popular Front are. Any coalition of working class and middle class parties allied together against the spread of fascism. Mostly leftist, far left, and radical left parties in Europe at this time. In Spain, there were the anarchists, members of the militant anarchists, liberals, leftists, communists such as Stalinists and the rival Trotskyists, and members of the middle class. They all did not see eye to eye, but they did win the election. The group as a whole are known as the Republicans here in Spain. The conservative groups, known as nationalists, the landowners, Roman Catholics or CEDA, the key members of the military, and fascists or the Falange, were the losers of this election. They did not take well to this. I discussed these parties in detail in episode 18. A few things happened after the election of the Popular Front that caused the right to begin to panic. In the western part of Spain, in Extremadura, on March 25th, 1936, 60,000 landless farm workers took over 3,000 farms by force. Then, on May 1st of 1936, there was a march of solidarity of the left that ended with the rumor that Catholic nuns were giving poison candy to the children, and crowds broke away from the parade and burned a convent. These types of violent activities created fear and hatred in the nationalists. On June 16th, Jose Calvo Sotelo, the opposition leader against the Republican government of Spain, spoke to Parliament suggesting a fascist state is in order to end the strikes and social disorder. His speeches gave confidence to the members of the military planning a coup. General Mola of the Spanish military and the leader of the coup had been posted to Pamplona. He is referred to the El Director of the secret plot for the military overthrow of the Popular Front. As planned, during the annual running of the polls in Pamplona on July 7th of 1936, conspirators gathered, with the big crowds being a perfect place to hide. Getting support from all the group was not as easy as they would have hoped. It wasn't until the fascist leader, Jose Antonio Primo de Rivera, more popularly known as Jose Antonio, pledged his support. did it really take off. On July 12th, in Madrid, Lieutenant Jose Castilla, a left-wing officer in the Assault Guards of the Republic's police force, was murdered in the street. His life had been previously threatened by right-wing extremists. As a result, a list of right-wing extremists was drawn up, and the police went out and round them up that night. One of the people rounded up was the previously mentioned right-wing leader, Jose Calvo Sotelo. He was assassinated that night. The government denied involvement, but the right did not believe it. This created a lot of support for the coup that followed. Back in 1934, an army general named Francisco Franco had helped to plan the army's defeat of the rebellion in Asturias that I covered in episode 18. After the election of the Popular Front in February, he was sent to a post in the Canary Islands. He and most of the unhappy generals were all posted outside of Spain. They were actually seen as a threat. On July 14th, a plane landed in the Canary Islands to get General Franco and take him to Morocco to lead the insurrection there. Franco was to lead the Moors and the Foreign Legion in the Spanish Morocco, the same units he had led in Asturias. On that same day, the funerals for both the leftist Castilla and the fascist Calvo Sotelo were held in Madrid. On July 17th, 1936, the day before the planned start, a group of military officers staged a military coup. It started as planned in Morocco, but quickly spread to the mainland. Workers and members of the Republicans immediately took up arms to fight against the military coup in some areas of Spain. The coup attempt did not succeed totally, but the coup was not simply defeated. Now that everyone was armed and had an axe to grind, Spain descended into all-out civil war. There was a lot of scores to settle, and a lot of them were settled. This all occurs merely 5 years after the end of Spanish monarchy, which had ruled Spain since the end of the 15th century. 5 years of democracy after well over 400 years of being ruled by a royal court. This was the same extreme change in the world as a whole. All the new forms of governments popping up everywhere. Communism in all of its forms, socialism, democracies, fascism, National Socialism. This civil war in Spain that started with an attempted military coup as an attempt to end the rule of the leftists, brought about by a release of pent-up anger brought on by generations of mistreatment and imposed will. This war started as an internal struggle with Spain. It was Spaniard against Spaniard, peasant against landowner, right wing against left wing, worker against shop owner. Time to take revenge, time to make the other side pay for being who they are. This all did not take just 5 years to ferment and blow. It had been building for generations. The coup was to begin on July 18th, but it started a day early. General Gabo, the leader of the rebellion, needed the professional army that was based in Morocco, led by General Franco. They were the Spanish military's best troops. General Franco asked Adolf Hitler for some help with transporting the troops. Adolf Hitler answered with a resounding yes. He sent the whole Condor Legion of his newly rebuilt Luftwaffe to Morocco. The Condor Legion was a unit of the German Air Force that consisted of at least 20 Junkers Ju-52 transport aircraft. These aircraft ferried Franco's troops to Seville in the southern Spain, where they began their offensive from. Word spread quickly throughout Spain. In the region of Catalonia, it was mostly through the efforts of the anarchists that the army was beaten. They easily took control of Barcelona. The workers were armed and they helped beat back any army rebels. Law and order subsided. During the celebrations, churches and monasteries were looted and burned. In Madrid, the Republican government had lost control of most of the rest of the country. The rebel army waited to act, and the Republican government, who didn't arm the people right there and then in Madrid, waited too. Neither side taking action against the other yet. Then the people got tired of waiting and stormed the barracks in the center of town that was being held by the army to get the rifles. They eventually succeeded, and shooting of the surviving soldiers in the barracks took place. It wasn't any different in the army-controlled areas. General Mola decides that members of the opposition must be shot. That an environment of terror must be established. The country was soon divided into the Army Rebel Zone, known as the Nationalist, and the Republican Zones, the popularly elected groups. During the first 6 months, anyone who was behind enemy lines, however they ended up there, ran the risk of being imprisoned or just herded into a field and shot for being on the wrong side of the lines. Prisons in certain areas were just opened and everyone was just let out because there were so many political prisoners in there. Those prisoners were replaced with political prisoners from the other side. International involvement, to begin with, was pretty much one-sided. Adolf Hitler of Germany said they would not get involved, but got involved immediately. This support for Franco's forces helps Germany in the future as they received iron ore from Spain throughout the Second World War. Italy also helped out by providing weapons and allowed right-wing groups and fascists to train their militaries on Italian soil. Prime Minister Blum of France wanted to support the Republicans with military aid, but went to Great Britain to make sure France had their support. Great Britain was not interested in getting involved. They thought if they got involved in the situation in Spain, it would drag all of Europe into a Second World War. Without assurances from Great Britain, along with resistance to involvement at home, Prime Minister Blum decides to take a hands-off, non-involvement stance. Both Britain and France then sign a non-intervention pact. Involvement by Stalin and the Soviet Union happened slowly. Stalin was worried about scaring Britain and France into thinking he was trying to start a communist revolution in Spain. Just a personal note, or a personal observation. There must be something seriously wrong with the system of government if the leader of that system knows the rest of the world lives in fear of that system, so he has to help other people trying to set up that system in secret. Personal note complete. There was a call put out by the Comintern, or Communist International, for people to volunteer to fight for the Republicans. This originated from the Soviet Union. Many members of the Communist Party from France, Britain, Germany, Italy, and the United States joined the fight on the sides of the Republicans. In September of 1936, General Franco is named leader of the nationalist government and named commander-in-chief of the military. In his speeches, he basically was declaring his government to be a dictatorship. Italy and Germany recognized Franco as leader of the nationalist Spain in November of 1936. And then by November of 1936, Madrid, the Spanish capital, was on the front lines. German and Italian planes were met in the skies by Soviet planes. General Franco decided to attack Madrid with the forces he had at hand. The resistance in the city, deciding to make a stand, fought with the slogan, "No pasarán," they shall not pass. The government left Madrid for Valencia, where it was a little safer. The people then stayed in Madrid, organized defenses, dug trenches, and built barricades. Men joined militia columns. These were trained by the military, disciplined in tactics of defense. These units fought alongside of the regular Republican Army units, and they made all the difference. The international brigades totaled over 40,000 people from all over the world by the end of the war. These international units that were available were rushed into the line in the defense of Madrid. By November 15th, the rebel army units had gotten through the outer defenses, but were stopped after some progress. Things stabilized and the front was inside the city of Madrid. General Franco then changed tactics. The use of terror bombing was implemented. This was the first time that a city was under constant bombardment from the air. People having to run to air shelters, indiscriminate bombing of civilians, a testing ground for the tactics that would be used in the coming World War. Italian fascist leader Benito Mussolini decided to send the Italian army and troops to help without asking General Franco. They had their first major battle at Malaga in the south of Spain and won a quick victory, increasing the territory held by the nationalists. Then farther north, the nationalists tried to encircle Madrid from the south of the city, but were stopped by Republican and international brigades with heavy losses on both sides. Then they decided to attack north of Madrid at Guadalajara. Italian forces wanted to do the whole thing, the whole operation themselves, but they ran into Italian international brigades right from the start. The attack failed miserably. Mussolini then declared the Italian army couldn't come home until they had won a battle. The battle for Madrid would last to the end of the Civil War in 1939. Since things bogged down at Madrid, the nationalists decided to turn their attention to the regions in the north. These mineral-rich areas with heavy industry, it is known as the Basque region due to the group of people living there that have been living in the region for generations. During the attack, General Mola tried to lay siege to the region by blockading the ports. On April 19th, British supply ships ran the blockade that turned out to be more of a ruse. Then, on April 26, 1937, General Franco decided to bomb Guernica, Spain, as a preliminary to the next offensive. This was the first time a concentrated bombing raid on a city got international attention. Planes from both the German Condor Legion and the Italian Legionary Air Force bombed the city mercilessly. Hundreds and hundreds of civilians were killed and injured. The city itself was devastated. The result of the offensive, which included the taking of Guernica on the 29th, was to take the capital of the region, Bilbao. This was also preceded by bombing from the air. It fell to the Nationalist forces on June 19th after heavy fighting in the city. The Nationalists turned the heavy industry there to their own benefit, selling iron ore to both Germany and Great Britain. During this time, the Republican organization of all the different philosophies started to fall apart. The anarchists, with their stronghold in Catalonia and its capital Barcelona, believed in and established a successful communal living and working environment. Money was banned, items were either bartered or the collective would issue coupons for the work performed. Everything, the workplace, the workshops, the farms, the bakeries, the tailor shops, everything was collectivized. Everyone was given their ration of food or anything else that was needed. They didn't believe in a system where there was someone in charge. Everything was agreed on by committee. This didn't work well when fighting a regular army. It didn't work well with the other political parties in the Republican government. They had appointed people in leadership positions, which goes against the anarchist beliefs. Also, in August of 1937, the Vatican recognizes Franco as leader of Spain. Remember, Roman Catholics and the militant Roman Catholics, the CEDA, were on the nationalist side. The war dragged on through the rest of 1937 and into 1938 with no real progress being made on either side. Republicans did launch two offensives into the Argonne area, one in Baliche and the other in Teruel. In each of them, a town was taken, but in both cases they were strategically unimportant. Both these areas were retaken by the Nationalist forces in January of 1938, when the offensive toward the Mediterranean by the Nationalist forces was underway. It wasn't until April 14th of 1938 that an offensive by the Nationalists in the northeast of Spain, that they were successful in dividing the Republican forces and territory into two. It was an attack on the southern border of Catalonia. Catalonia and its capital Barcelona were separated from the rest of Republican Spain. In the southern sector, the key city of Valencia was now threatened by the Nationalist forces. On July 24th and 25th of 1938, a major offensive by the Republican forces was launched across the Ebro River in the north to take pressure off of Valencia. They threw everything they had into this battle. It was initiated by the Prime Minister of the Republican forces, Juan Negrin. He was the leader of the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party. He had tried to get everyone to work together as a true military, with orders being followed immediately without discussion. This was supported by the communists, who ultimately took their orders from Joseph Stalin in the USSR, but This went against the beliefs of the anarchists and some others. This inability to see things in the same way, and due to this not being able to work together from a military perspective, doomed the Republican forces from the beginning. In this campaign across the Ebro River, the Republican forces made large advances, as much as 25 miles into nationalist-held territory, to the village of Gandesa. General Franco personally took charge of the nationalist forces in this battle and brought reinforcements from other areas of Spain. The nationalists were supplied by Germany and Italy, and the nationalists mainly by the USSR. The advance stopped at Gandesa and turned into a war of attrition for the next 4 months. During the time of this battle, things going on in other parts of Europe play a significant role in the outcome. We'll be discussing these in detail in a future episode, but on September 30th of 1938, the Munich Agreement is signed. This agreement had nothing to do with Spain, but it had an impact on foreign aid of each side that was fighting. Stalin and the USSR decided to end support for the Republican forces. Mussolini withdrew 10,000 Italian troops from the nationalist forces. On October 29th, the international brigades left the battlefront and went home. The only country to increase military aid was Hitler and Germany. This gave a big boost to Franco, needed to end the Battle of the Ebro. On December 23rd of 1938, nationalist forces then marched towards and into Catalonia, first taking Tarragona and then on to Barcelona. Barcelona was captured on January 26th of 1939. Refugees poured north out of the area and into France. Refugee or internment camps were set up in France for the people fleeing Franco's army. The border was closed by Franco on February 10th, 1939. Catalonia had fallen to nationalist forces. All that was left under Republican control was Madrid, the capital, and southeast Spain. Juan Negrin, the Republican prime minister, had fled, but returned to Spain in Republican-held territory and the port city of Alicante. All during the time of the Battle of Ebro and then the collapse of Catalonia, he had been aligning himself closer and closer with the communists, mainly because they were better fighters, and originally had the support of Stalin. This aligning with the communists was his undoing. In Madrid, General Casado, leader of the Republican forces, felt that Negrin was too close to the communists, which he felt was a stumbling block to a negotiated peace settlement, and launched a coup against him. It was successful. Negrin and his government left Spain for the last time. The communist forces had decided not to back him and basically just gave up. There were some skirmishes in Madrid between communists and other Republican forces that backed General Casado. This went on for about 2 weeks. Then General Casado, whom Franco had stopped communicating with, just decided to surrender all Republican forces. Madrid fell to the nationalists without a fight. The last of the Republicans tried to escape to Alicante, but no ships came to rescue them. Franco declared victory and the war to be over on April 1st of 1939. Immediately, the reprisals, purges, executions began. Anyone who fought on the side of the Republicans or was even a simple supporter of the Republican cause was subject to trial and execution. Sometimes people were just shot without trial. Again, hate for other people just because of their political beliefs was a justification for killing each other. In this civil war, people were regularly rounded up, taken somewhere, and shot. Parks had bodies of those shot just lying there. Fields, random walls in cities, where the bodies of those shot were just lying there. This has got to have a psychological effect on a populace, where death becomes routine. This must diminish the value of human life and having a lasting effect on a society. A total of about 500,000 people were killed in this civil war. Of those, it is estimated that the nationalists executed about 75,000 people, and the Republicans executed about 55,000 people. That is 130,000 human beings lined up and shot. That's more than the population of Ann Arbor, Michigan. It takes people to do the shooting. Hate is a deadly thing. This is just another example. Franco ruled Spain as dictator until his death in 1975. The semi-fascist rule softening over the years. In 1947, he made an official referendum that set up Spain as a state monarchy led by him. His successor was chosen to be Juan Carlos, who would be king of Spain when Franco died. This happened on November 20th, 1975. Juan Carlos would transform Spain into a democracy within a couple of years. In my next video, we will be back in 1936. I will cover what happens in Japan and China in 1936, and I will end 1936 with a video on Great Britain and Italy. If it's short enough, maybe I can combine the two. Thank you again for watching. Please be sure to share this with a friend. You can easily do this by having them go to the website www.historyonyoutube.com. A good YouTube search string is Mike W. 95 Years War. Remember, let go of the hate. It only hurts everyone.